Hey everybody, it's Peter Bowden. I hope you're having a great day. Are you psyched? We're going to do a little case study today, looking at how congregational websites and the text on your websites can really have a huge impact, I think, on visitors who are exploring and really have an impact on whether or not they feel like they want to connect further. I had an experience recently where I was looking at some congregational websites back to back, and I had this real visceral experience going from one to the other. So I'm going to dive into that. First, I want to say welcome. Please type in where you're tuning in from. I love seeing where people are tuning in from. We've got people now joining these weekly sessions really internationally. And most exciting, next week, we are going to start having live guests in these Facebook Live sessions. Not every time. I'll still do sessions alone, do Q&As. But next week, my first guest is the Reverend Dr. Deborah Hafner, minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Reston, Virginia. Check this out. During the session with her, we're going to talk about their incredible membership growth. This congregation, which according to the UUA's information now, is like they're over 200 members, but they've added 101 members in the last 2 years. Check that. 101 new members in 2 years. That's incredible. How do they do it? What's the story? We're going to find out. So I want you, if you're interested in congregational growth, outreach, sharing Unitarian Universalism with the world, and having your congregation have a greater impact, after we're done with this session, look in our UU Planet group, Facebook group, and I've already scheduled the session with Rev Deborah, so you can click get a reminder there and invite other people. I think there's going to be an incredible session with her, and I'm going to start using some of the audio from our Facebook Live sessions and interviews to start a new podcast. All right, new podcast, baby. Here we go. All right. And last week somebody said, Peter, how much coffee have you had? Which is kind of a little joke and a little poke. The reality is, I love what we're talking about, and I love Unitarian Universalism, and I love helping you lead and grow amazing congregations. So let's get into it. All right. I'm just going to make sure real quick that I had like 10 people try and join last second. So we just want to make sure everyone's in the group, who wants to be in the group. Yes, we're good. All right. Now, so here's the story. The other day, I went and looked at a congregational website, and it was just fine, the language about it. When on front page or the About You page, it's typical things like it says, all right, the Unitarian Universalist congregation of some city, is a liberal religious congregation. Talk about, and there's bullet points: respecting diversity, celebrating community, nurturing intellectual and spiritual growth. That's all good stuff. That's in our principles. I looked at another site, after looking at that one, and it's a similar thing. All right, our congregation is a member of the Unitarian Universalist Association, 1,000 congregations, liberal religion, D's not creeds, and then it listed out the principles, all right, 7 principles, then sources. I'm like, all right, yeah, okay. Now, I'm an existing Unitarian Universalist, raised a Unitarian Universalist, so I know all these things, bullet points, numbered lists, fine, I get it. Had no emotional impact on me whatsoever. So I wasn't thinking about it too much until I went to the next website. And I look at a lot of UU websites. And as soon as I landed on that website, the language there was different. Whereas in these other websites I'd been looking at, and one in particular just immediately before, and I think going from one to the other made for this really stark contrast. This website, it was, welcome to such and such. And there was a narrative. And it was, we, the congregation of such and such. And then they described the congregation. And the language, it spoke to the principles. It spoke to who we are, what we're about. But instead, listen to this. Instead of bolded list, inherent worth and dignity, blah, 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 it was, we strive to be a spiritual community where hearts and minds are encouraged to grow, question, discover, and learn. And as soon as I landed on that site and I read that, I had this, Now, one, it it's a narrative, and they start with we. Now, if you look at these other sites, and I challenge you to look at your site, are you talking about your congregation in this generic third person? The congregation of such and such place is about this or does that. We're talking about people and someone landing on your congregation's website and considering, is this a community for me? So we can include the principles and all these things, but I think it's really important to include a narrative, more of a narrative welcome, which just spells it out in really well crafted words. This congregation talks about having a long history of diversity, inclusion, and then talks about how those beliefs are at the core of Unitarian Universalism and the core of the congregation, and just goes on to talk about welcoming congregation and the different people they embrace. And then it's very clear, it says that they support each person on their religious journey. And then important, those other sites didn't have it front and center. We invite you to share your religious journey with us. Now, it might seem like a simple thing. So this congregation, it's instead of like a list, principles is what we believe. This is one's narrative. But there are two words that really jumped out at me, and I had this emotional reaction, like, these are my people. They're talking about the same things, but that one's a bulleted list. This one is saying, hey, what's we? We is a bunch of people. Which people? My people. All right. Fellow Unitarian Universalists. When we say the word we are talking about people. And so people relate to that language differently than the Unitarian Universalist First Parish congregation of some city, wherever. Sounds like a building. Okay. And then the word you. There's different studies that looked at the most favorite word people have, that people respond favorably to, is their own name. And then that's followed by the word you. When we talk about, whether it's in preaching, sermons, on websites, when we go from talking about things in a third person generic way, where someone's just reading it and it's at a distance, when we start talking about we and then specifically you, that brings people into it. So this is just a little thing, but because I had such a visceral reaction going from just third person generic bullet point about our congregation in history. We have a lot of congregations that feature history, to here's what we're about. We, the congregation, and we hopefully share that with you, and we invite you. I think that can be really powerful. So I encourage you, tweak that on your website. Take people who are interested in membership growth, outreach, membership development. Take a look at your websites and look at the language. Is it narrative in terms of your welcome and about pages? So you've got your front page of your website when people first land. Then there's a page about your congregation. Then often we have visitor pages. On those pages, now this language isn't that long. We're talking like a few paragraphs, but it had a big difference for me. And if it had a difference for me, I'm like, my parents are born in the same congregation. I'm raised UU. I'm like, just like full on UU. I'm married to a minister. And so if I had this visceral reaction going from a mediocre language to more personal language, guaranteed your visitors are. So do your visitors, I'm talking about visitors to your website, do they feel you speaking to them? And then the other thing that congregation did is had a link to a really well-crafted message from the minister. And again, reiterating beliefs, reiterating what the congregation is about, inviting people into the journey. And I love the way this minister ended. It says, almost 30 years ago, I walked into my first Unitarian Universalist service. It changed my life. Perhaps a visit to UUCR will change yours. Oh my God. It's like, yes. Well, it's actually saying this might change your life. Oh, and what did I do? I said the letter was representing the congregation. Whose congregation is it? It's our guest next week, the Reverend Dr. Deborah Hafner. When I was doing some research online, looking at congregations' websites. I'm working on developing a little more detailed Facebook training, which I'll tell you guys more about soon. And so I was looking at different sites, and then I got a message from her and went to her website. And all of a sudden on that website, the language is so different. So next week, we're going to find out more about the amazing story of that congregation and how they've added 101 members in 2 years. So I tied this session into that session. This session's almost like an advertisement for that session. All right. So here's a question for you. Do you have questions about this? What do you think about the whole notion of having a narrative welcome with language like we, you, it's, that sort of thing, versus just straight language? Like the bullet points, classic principles, cut and paste. And also, I was looking at some of the congregations that are using the UUA WordPress theme, and some of those, that kind of narrative welcome, some of your congregations are losing that, the way modules are set up. You want to make sure that you really do a good job welcoming people. And I just got to open up my comments. If you have questions, whether it's about this or something else, feel free to share them in a comment now. That's all I wanted to talk to you guys about. I just want to share that little experience I had, because if you can tweak the language of your website to make people who are visiting it, exploring it, questioning whether or not Unitarian Universalism is right for them, if you can adjust your language a little bit, going from bullet lists and numbered lists and generic, like these are the principles, to more narrative language and welcoming people and sharing, emotion and heart, that could have a huge impact on someone's life. I always look at this from the perspective of how are we impacting someone's lives. So now, comments. I'm going to jump back over to our group page, and we might wrap up this one early. We're going through this really quick. Hold on one second. I got to pull up the group. Podcast question. So here is the deal with here's the question. We've been told by our millennial web designer that when we use we language, it comes across as insidery. Thoughts? Ooh, that's a great question. Again, we've been told by our millennial web designer that when we use we language, it comes across as insidery. I think that if you flip it, if you don't use the word we and you don't use the word you, and you just say, the congregation of such and such is established in this and does that and and values these things, there's distance. All right, there's distance between the person looking at the website, reading the website, and the congregation. What we're using we and you language to kind of bridge that. Obviously, someone said it depends on how you use the we language. Absolutely. So I think the person who asked about the web designer and we language, it's very important to look at how are you using the we language. Is it all about we do this, we do that, and things that are focusing on just the community and articulating things that are more painting a picture? Well, I mean, just look at that. Like, is the way you're talking about yourself promoting inviting people in to trying to establish rapport with people online, to let them know they're welcome? Some of the websites that I mentioned, it's just very matter of fact, and there's and after the principles and purposes, sources, and just generic what we're about, third person, no we, it says visit us on Sundays at this time. It doesn't really feel to me like those people really want you to visit or really feel passionately about what the congregation is about. When we're using more narrative language, including we, and then, of course, invitations to you if you want this, I think we can communicate in a more emotional way. So if you have a congregation website that has really great invitations and descriptions of the kind we're talking about, share it in the comments. I always welcome you to, if you have an example of something related to what we're discussing in these sessions, share it in a comment. Or maybe it's hey, what do you guys think of our congregation? And then we can offer each other feedback. All right. Oh my I just pulled up the group, and there are 3 people who wanted to join this group. I added people to our group right before this session, like 10 seconds before I went live, and they're all going to be like, "Wah." Sorry, friends. That's what happens when you wait to the very last minute. I'm letting these people all in. All right, now the podcast. I'm gonna wrap up there. So, as of right now, and this could adapt or adjust with your feedback, I want to do regular sessions, these weekly Facebook Live sessions in this group. So the video is in the group that all of you who are like my core little leadership learning community can ask questions live like you're doing now. And then after we have the sessions, take the audio from those live sessions and then turn that into an audio podcast that is available publicly, so that people can subscribe to the podcast and get learn from our sessions together. Let's see other comments. Do you guys like the idea of a podcast? Let me know. Give me a like if you like the podcast. Right now, I like 3 or 4 likes. If you're interested, do you like the idea of doing live sessions with guests, learning from other congregations, other leaders? Give me some likes, man. I'm hungry for some likes. I know it's not all about the likes, but I love you guys. All right. And I appreciate these sessions and our learning together. Let me just do a last look of the comments. Yes, was I Peter, be less punctual. I started too soon. All right. I promise that in the future, especially if I'm promoting people joining this group, that I'll do a better job of glancing, letting people in right after we start. All right. So the people are liking the podcast. Good. Oh, I jumped up to 16 likes. Woohoo! I'm getting all my little endorphin rushes, right? I've been working really hard not to be addicted to my smartphone. I put it in airplane mode all the time, which is for me just like be with the humans I'm with, including right now. It's off. It's off. I care about you. All right. Now, anything else we got to talk about? I think we're done. I'm going to keep this a short session. Thank you. If you know people who are working with membership development, congregational websites, outreach, marketing, share this session with them. Invite them to the group. What I've been doing is after these sessions are done, I do take the video, record it on my computer, and then upload a version of that to YouTube, and then embed that on my website at uuplanet.org. So if you go to uuplanet.org, there you can find sessions, and often with some notes about what we're talking about here. So that's really a great way. I haven't talked too much about that in the group, but if you want to share things that are happening in this group, but don't necessarily want to invite people into the group, or say you want to bring something to a meeting you're having or a discussion, you can always go to uuplanet.org and get the content there. All right. Thank you all. I appreciate your being here and our learning together and the work that we're doing together to share our faith and values with the world, and especially for the people who would be with us if we really help them understand what we're about. I'm married to a minister. I'm working with Unitarian Universalism constantly, and I'm constantly coming upon people who either don't quite understand who we are, or they understand, but the invitation and process for joining, for connecting, is a little hard for them, especially as we're dealing with more and more technology. It's a big part of my work now. How do we take our technology, social media, and connect with people who are isolated and welcome them into our hearts and our lives? So thank you. Have a great weekend. And I can't wait for our session next week with Rev Deborah. Make sure you invite people. It's going to be an incredible session, I think. I don't want to do too much build up, but it's going to be amazing. All right. Have a great day.